Yeah, those Jacksonville Jaguars had a real good offseason. We're going to talk about that and how they can translate that to a good start and a good finish on the field. Just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Not one lie has been told. It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars, and we thank you for making us your first listen. A quick reminder to go over to our YouTube page that is called, wait for it, Locked On Jaguars. And when you get there, make sure you hit that like button. I'll say it again, hit the like button. Then make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode of Locked On Jaguars, and then hit the bell so you get notifications each and every time we drop an episode of Locked On Jaguars. Also, wherever you get your audio podcast, make sure you check into that location each and every day so you do not miss an episode. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Shout out to the everydayers for joining us every single day. And you can be an everydayer too. All you got to do is join us every single day. When you see me in public, just say, Wig, what up, man? I'm an everydayer. Tell me your name, and I will give you a shout out on the show. All right, when we land this plane, man, what we're going to do, we're going to talk about hot start, but then in segment 3, a hotter finish. Well, it's imperative that over the last couple of years, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they've had one season where they had a slow start and a hot finish, and then they had a hot start and a slow finish. How can we get that to, even if we cool both of them off the start and the finish, how can it be more consistent where the team looks the same from the beginning of the season that they did towards the end? That's segment 2 and 3. Right now, we're going to not bury the lead and talk about how we had a good offseason and how it could build momentum. So most of the time when teams have good off seasons and they don't have a history of having good end seasons or good regular seasons, what usually happens with that is people go off season Super Bowl champs. And it's usually a little condescension with it, like, yeah, they won the offseason again. And they're not wrong for saying that, right? So, you might think like, well, this ain't the flex you think it is. No, actually it is, because I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna nuance this to you so you understand exactly how this is not the same thing. I look at it like this. If you were in the offseason and you try to win every single day, what else are you supposed to be doing? Lose the offseason? You notice in 2023, the end of the offseason, 2022-23, they didn't do much, man. They really, really didn't. They kind of stood pat. And that's one of the things that we talked about that was a detriment to last season. Even though they got off to an extremely hot start by doing that, I know 11 weeks into the season, they thought we did the right thing. They thought we did the right thing. I think that standing pat accidentally created a monster. And what that monster was complacency. They fed that complacency to the team. And what happened is, everybody admitted that they were sitting around waiting for things to happen that never did. They were waiting for, even when their record was what it was, man, they weren't playing well. And they weren't playing well. They were just winning. And we were having debates back then of whether or not it was sustainable for them to keep doing that. Obviously, it wasn't. Maybe it was, but they just failed to do it. The team winning the week 18 just needed to beat the Tennessee Titans, who weren't even 500 and all that, and they would have made the playoffs. Didn't happen. Did not happen. So we're trying to look at maybe a different approach this offseason and how that can translate to getting off to a better start, lack of complacency, and then just consistency with the effort that you get. Of course, we don't want it to be consistently mediocre. We want it to be either good or bad based on the last 2 starts they've had. And they had some good starts and some bad starts, but they also had some good endings. How about playing that way the entire time and maybe getting 12 wins, and even the ones that they don't win, those games are super, super competitive. They can do that. But I'm going to give them credit for winning the offseason, and it doesn't come with some caveat of sarcasm or condescending just, like, yeah, whatever. And people do that because a lot of times teams do try to win in marketing, and teams do try to win in the court of public opinion, and even sometimes on social media, and they try to win the offseason because they don't do a good job of winning on the football field. Any and every football fan will tell you the first thing they want is their team to win on the football field. But if they can't, then I think sometimes teams really go overboard to lead with other things because it masks some of the things that they don't do very well, like win games during the regular season when they matter. And it's not the fact that the Jaguars they had a terrible record. No, they were 9-8 2 straight years. But the difference is it's the games that they lost and how they lost some of them and the time they lost some of them that is really, really, really bothersome to me, and I'm sure it's bothersome to the fans. Let me tell you some of the good things that they have done in the offseason. By going out, even though Shad Khan did come out, I saw a Pro Football Talk article where he said, we can't fall in love with free agents, man. We got to be able to develop our own talent. Let me tell you why the timing of that is really, really weird. It's because that's exactly what they did, not this past offseason, not the one before, and it didn't work. They tried to go draft and development. Then, in an offseason where they absolutely went ballistic and they went out and signed some high-priced guys in free agency like Eric Armstead, and then they went and got Gabe Davis. They added Mitch Morse and Ronald Darby, and we can go on and on about all the different parts and pieces that they got. They didn't go super, super crazy, but they were very, very active those first few days of free agency and had their names mentioned with a lot of different people. So what that means for me is that while the idea and the thought of draft and development is all cool, you got to do a little bit of both, right? And you can't get solely into drafting and developing until you're competitive on the field, because you're drafting and developing and bringing guys into a situation where the culture is not one of winning, and therefore it doesn't cultivate excellence. So the Jaguars have to compete now, take advantage of the window that they have to improve and get better. Give those players that are trying to draft and develop somebody in front of them that are actually better than them, and gives them a goal to aim towards. And for the people that don't really understand what I mean by that is, I'm going to look at Parker Washington, who I believe is a developmental player who's going to eventually be the slot receiver for this team. I don't know if it's next year or year after that, but having Christian Kirk in front of him, well, that's a target for him. That's a target. I'll give you a perfect example. I'm not saying that Parker Washington's going to be a Hall of Famer, but Antonio Brown was a guy who they brought in Pittsburgh as a 6th-round pick, and they put him in a situation. It's like, okay, and guess what he did? He slowly started to earn his way and earn his keep through his work ethic, the fact that he was an Energizer bunny on the field, he played special teams, and eventually he was undeniable, and you could not keep him off the field. But you had to give him a target. Instead of just drafting a guy and playing him too early, and then you might ruin him. And I think sometimes the Jaguars have done that. Got a new stadium built. If you're looking at the thumbnail on YouTube, you can see we did it. The entire brass and the city of Jacksonville really dusted their shoulders off with a whole bunch of people that had criticized them over the years and throughout the years. They were like, nah, man, we got this. And they did it in the city. The city council stepped up, even though, some back and forth between them and a lot of the fans. It finally happened. What that does is shut up the skepticism, and it gives people something else to talk about other than whether or not the Jaguars are leaving to that great metropolis called Gotham City that I keep telling y'all doesn't even really exist. But it is important, though, that the narratives start to switch and start to change. This city is dedicated to that team. The ownership and the management did work with the mayor and the city council to get it done. The Jaguars will be here for the next 30 years. So this is their home. This is where they're going to be. So now we can just focus on the football. Is the football going to be good enough to get them off to a hot start? I'm going to look at the schedule and tell you why it scares me to absolute death that won't happen. But I do think that this is the year that it should and needs to happen for the Jaguars. So hopefully that talent they added to the team will help them. I'll tell you all about that and more here as we move on to the segment number 2 in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. I got to let you know about the Gametime app, man. Here, look, if you need tickets to anything, right, and you waited till the last minute, and you usually have people saying stuff to you like your lack of planning doesn't constitute an emergency on my part, that's nonsense. Your lack of planning absolutely constitutes an emergency on Gametime's part because that's what they do. They have a priority of last minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and everything else, even flash deals and zone deals, all in pricing, seat views, all of that stuff. What you need to do is download the Gametime app for all of your last minute ticket requests and requirements. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets to these beautiful ballparks around the country with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and the redeem code is Locked On NFL, all one word. I'll spell it LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Segment number 2 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. Talk about a team that won the offseason by doing some amazing, amazing things. One of those things that they did, that's a byproduct of all of the things that they did. I forgot to tell you, I mentioned they, by the way, shout out to Trevor Lawrence and his beautiful bride, Marissa, and they are expecting their first baby. All of us have a new nephew coming or a new niece. Now, we ain't going to overplay that too much. That's kind of a joke. Don't be invading people's privacy. But don't you love when people you like, man, have kids and they get to share their joy with you? It is something. There was a picture of them sitting on their floor with Marissa holding her stomach and Trevor had the sonogram picture in his hand. I know what that feels like, man. I'm telling you, I know what it feels like to have to get that first notification that you're gonna have your first child. So healthy, boy or girl, doesn't matter. We don't necessarily need to ask for another quarterback. No, she can be whatever she wants to be. If she wants to be a quarterback, she can do that too, if it's a she. So we're gonna wish for good health and good fortune for them on their journey to become parents. But he also got something else. He got the bag, man. Trevor got $142 million guaranteed at signing, another 200 total impossible guarantees that he can make, and a 5-year $275 million contract or something like that. In other words, he got the Skrilla, right? That's a commitment. That's what that represents. Besides the fact that it is a lot of money, it is a commitment to Trevor Lawrence. It is them telling Trevor Lawrence, you are our future. So we can stop all that nonsense about whether or not he earned the money. I did a show on that early this week, or whether he deserves it. All of that is relative. But I do think the Jaguars made the correct decision in doing that. So new stadium, new contract for a quarterback, unprecedented contract, especially for anybody that's ever played in Jacksonville. And they've started to change this narrative to actually being able to retain people. You can't draft and develop if you don't give guys second contracts. So that's a big, big thing that Shad Khan mentioned early this week. And it's showing on the football field. They actually, and it looks like they're going to try to re-sign some other guys, maybe a couple of those DBs. They did retain Josh Allen, gave him a contract. So the two highest paid players on the team are really good football players who are also good people who love what the process of getting better and winning is all about. And they're going to work hard and you never have to worry about them. They're going to come in early and they're going to leave late. And that's exactly the type of stuff that changes franchises when done day by day. So good for them with that. What does it mean for the season, though? How about getting off to a hot start? Well, I know a lot of y'all will sit there and go, tried that last year, dude. We were 8-3. What are you talking about? Got out to a hot start and still didn't make the playoffs. That is very true. They got out to a hot start in the standings. They didn't get off to necessarily a hot start as a team with the way that they played during the season, because we were all sitting around waiting. And I love when people point out how Trevor Lawrence, between the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023, they love to throw that record around. They say stuff like he's 15-3 or 15-4 or whatever, right? Don't kid yourself. They weren't playing well. The best game Trevor Lawrence played last year was after that, when they went to Houston. So don't play yourself now trying to, do analysis based on what stat sheets say, and what, instead of remembering that we were all saying that the defense and the turnovers that the defense was creating was the main reason why the Jaguars were 8-3, even though they hadn't played well. And the spin that we had it on that at the time was, if they just figured out, man, they 8-3, and while they're struggling, if they figure it out, man, they might not lose a game. Somebody picked them to go 14-3 or 13-4. And I said at one point, well, I ain't too far off if they just win the rest of them. Little did I know that was not going to be the case. So how did they get off to a hot start? The schedule, in my opinion, does not make that easy to do. And in the NFL, no games are easy, but the schedule in the NFL, I told you, I'm scared to death of the Miami game. And the reason why is because I think one of the chief concerns that you have about this team, with a new scheme, new defensive coordinator, and maybe with the biggest question, the secondary, well, they got to go against a track team. They got to go against a team that's Jalen Waddle, Cheetah, Odell as your slot receiver. And then, oh, by the way, all of the running backs are super fast. Where's Raheem? You're talking about Mostert, and you're talking about Devin Achane. For me, the biggest thing for me in that game is, can Miami run the ball on Jacksonville's front seven with all of the changes that they've had on their offensive line? But the fact that the Jaguars have a lot of new pieces and new parts and a new coach and a new scheme, that game scares me, because all it takes is 3 big plays and the Miami Dolphins can win. The Jaguars can play well all game and give up 3 big plays that the Dolphins are very, very capable of making. And then they'll be in a little bit of trouble. And then you got Cleveland at home. That was a really, really good contested game that they played last year. But the Browns ain't no punk. They're good on both lines of scrimmage. Then they go up to Buffalo. That probably still feels that they have something to prove. And they got a great quarterback. And then they come home against Houston. And then they go to Indy. This is not easy, man. Even the game at Chicago with all of their new offense. So them getting off to a hot start would be, in those first 6 weeks, to me, hot would be going 4-2. Okay would be 3-3. Unacceptable is 2-4 or worse. But I will still like to know how they're playing and watch how they're playing to make sure that we assess that for what it is. They have a very winnable game in week 7 against the Patriots, and then they play at home again in week 8 as a very, very good game at 1 o'clock against the very talented Green Bay Packers team. And then week 9, they go to Philadelphia. I don't know why they're going to Philly 2 years in a row, but that's what it is. They go to Philadelphia in week 9. Week 10, they got Minnesota at home. That should be a very winnable game. If it's not, there's trouble. So let's just say through week 10, if I said 4-2 was a hot start, and maybe they're going to beat New England, I think, and then Green Bay and Philadelphia, I'm going to give you one of those games. So I'm going to say they're 3-1, and that makes them 7-3 at 10 games. All right. And this is the part of their season where it gets tough, because in week 11, they go to Detroit. And then in week 13, they're back at home against Houston. And then this is a game they got to win. They got to go up to Tennessee and they got to beat them. You got to just go up there and beat them, man. That's going to be, they're improved, I believe, and that's going to be on their minds last year. I don't think they'll be very, very good record-wise, but they have some explosive pieces on that team, and they have a lot of speed, and the Jaguars have to be ready to play yet again. At home against the Jets, that's a tough game, whether Aaron Rodgers is there or not. I think that's going to be a very, very tough game. At the Raiders, that's around 3 days before Christmas on week 16. Another tough game because of the way Antonio Pierce always has them playing. At home against the Titans, I think they'll at the very least split with them, and then they're home against the Colts. So I think if they, in those first 10 games, if the Jaguars can get out to a little bit of a 7-3, I think they got a real good shot. They got a real good shot at least winning 12 and going 12-5, right? At least I think they'll be in the ballpark when the time comes for them to do that. I really, really do. I want to let you know about something else, though. If you're watching Fox Sports and ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you the likelihood that if they start off 7-3, the likelihood that they can end the season really, really well and have a hotter finish than they're used to in the past, and exactly what that would mean for the playoffs and what that would look like. I'll tell you about all of that here in segment number 3 in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. All right, here we go. Third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. What we've discussed already is a good offseason and how it builds the momentum for the year, but doesn't mean a hill of beans if you don't go out and transfer or translate all of that goodwill to a better start. We talked about the hot start. We've seen them have a hot start last year when they probably weren't playing that well. We also seen them have a slow start a couple of years ago, and then they have a really, really hot finish. I'm always curious as to which one of those seasons did you enjoy the most? Did you? I know the collapse at the end was awful, and Shad Khan has called it an organizational failure. And I absolutely agree with that term. I had not thought about it, but that just means it was all of our fault. Everybody did it. It was players, it was coaches, it was all of us, it was the attitude, it was our approach to, like you got to win everything, every single thing. And that's why I'm so happy that they at least decided on certain days in the offseason that they were going to win, because that's where your feet are. Wherever you are right now, that's what you're supposed to be doing, right? And I thought they had a pretty good draft. I thought they did okay in free agency as well. But collectively, when you add all of those things together, I thought they made a lot of tough decisions that had to be made, like not going out and spending a whole bunch of money on expensive interior offensive linemen when the market was going to be that way. How they pivoted off of the Calvin Ridley situation and were able to add other players to the offense and then take Brian Thomas Jr., BTJ, in the first round. I thought they did a really, really good job. Getting that to equal a really, really good start, it's not necessarily something that you feel like the offseason is an on-ramp for that in and of itself, and I explain. I think the part where he said, Shad Khan said it was an organizational failure, I think mentally, I think he was talking about right here, right? Of how they chose to move. So if they don't move that way, hopefully the hot start will come this year and they'll actually be playing as well as their record indicates, as opposed to last year when they were 8-3 and they looked like they were 3-8, in my opinion. And how does that translate to a hotter finish? Well, they've shown the propensity in the past, even though they've had a lot of turnover, to finish seasons. Last year, they did not do that. What was missing? I think the sense of urgency was missing, and everyone was sitting around watching, trying to figure out what was going on instead of somebody doing something, right? How do you get people to do something? You motivate them. How do you motivate them? You motivate them by putting better players around you, and if you don't do it, somebody will. In the past, the Jaguars didn't have that luxury. Well, now, especially on the defensive line, at wide receiver, at defensive back, no, they have people that they're not going to sit over there and watch you just like, for instance, there was nothing they could do last year with Luke Fortner in the lineup. It is now. Yeah, they're going to start Mitch Morse, and if Fortner still ain't no good, they're going to play Tyler Shalley or even give Cooper Hodges some minutes at the center position. They ain't got to put up with mediocrity anymore at these positions that were causing the Jaguars not to play well. I think they have a lot more options at tackle with everybody being healthy and Walker Little being your number 3, and now you got Javon Foster as your number 4. I definitely believe the additions on the defensive line and the development of guys like Tyler Lacy, who I heard has worked himself into really, really good shape, combined with the scheme change, combined with guys who are wanting to get money, finally getting it, and Josh Allen, combined with Devon Hamilton being a little bit more healthy, and the fact that Mason Smith and Justin Jefferson are going to be adding a lot of size, youth, and depth and strength on that defensive line. And Trayvon Walker is going to come back. I think he's going to have a breakout season this year. So now what you're getting is that competition, those guys wanting those reps, those guys building each other up, the leadership, helping each other after practice. I think that's going to create a situation where they're going to have a hotter finish because they're not going to be complacent. That activity, that not being idle, sitting around waiting for something to happen. No, I think they got a room full of guys in all of these rooms that are going to do everything they can to create situations as opposed to wait opportunistically for that situation to create them and thus put an identity on the football field. I absolutely believe that is a byproduct of what? Not resting on your laurels. That is a byproduct of making sure you're very, very proactive. And yeah, that's what I believe will happen this year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's going to be a little bit more balance of not that big variance that you saw. Cold start, hot finish, hot start, cold finish. I think you're going to level off and be more consistent. Where is it going to be? Is it 9 win, 10 win, 11 win, 12 win, or are we going to shoot for the sky and go for 13? At what point do they hit stride? And at what point do they sit there and go into cruise control and sort of level off and start playing consistently at that level every single week? Going to be very, very interesting. I think I'm going to go to a lot of games this year on the road. Don't tell my wife, but I do. I think I'm going to go, hey, baby, I know you're watching, but I might go to every game on the road this year. Fly out Saturday afternoon and then, come home Sunday night. I'm really, really thinking of doing that. Anybody got a private plane y'all want to give me? I'll use it and go. You don't need a private plane to fly from this episode to the next one. All you need is to know where we are, and that is everywhere you get your podcast, audio or video. Make sure you tap into Locked On Jaguars every single day. And also check out Locked On Sports Today. It's the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. You guys take care of each other. Have a nice weekend. It's raining. There's a tornado warning around here, but y'all be good and be careful, man, and enjoy this weekend and that rain. Get you a nap. It's the best time to take a nap. It's when it's raining outside. All right, don't sleep on the show, though. Make sure you check me out every single day here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. Thank you once again for joining us here on Locked On Jaguars.